everyone, back at with me Dante from Dante's Book Talk with another book review. And today I'm going to talk about the fourth novel in the John Puller series, and that is No Man's Land by David Baldacci. First of all, I know this is the month of October and I'm supposed to be talking about horror novels, but truth to be told, I haven't finished The Exorcist, and in fact, I'm still 20 pages into the novel. And unfortunately, I just can't stay hiatus, I have to make some contents. So hopefully I can finish that novel as soon as possible and talk about it next week. And in the meantime, let's talk about No Man's Land. So the story of No Man's Land centers around two characters. On one side, we have John Puller, who's trying to investigate a case about the disappearance of his mother, Jackie Puller, who 30 years ago left the house and never returned. Her case still remains unsolved to this day. But this investigation doesn't happen out of nowhere. It begins when John Puller's mother's old friend accuses his father of killing his mother. On the other side, we have a mysterious man named Paul Rogers who has just gone out of prison and is on parole. But although he is still on parole, he has no intention of obeying the rules, because as soon as he is out, he's immediately hunting down a group of people who took his humanity and tortured him, decades ago. Although the missions carried by our two main characters don't seem to be related, they are actually connected in a way that both of them could never have imagined. Okay, so the first thing that I like about this novel is the two mysteries that don't seem to be related, but they are actually connected. This is one of the elements that I often found in David Baldacci novels, and this element makes the story suspenseful and intriguing from the very beginning till the very end. And as always, this novel is also quite fast-paced, a real page-turner. And in addition to that, there is also a good number of twists and turns. And then there is this one clue that at first I thought it'd be a red herring, but it turned out to be, an important clue and not just a red herring. And I was quite taken aback by it. This clue actually shows how these two cases are connected. There is also a theme about family or duty, and I just love how John Puller is a family man. Unlike his father, who back then, chose his career over his family. In this novel, we can clearly see how John Puller is willing to find out what happened to his mother, despite of the fact that he can lose his job, because apparently his mother's case turns out to be much more complex than it appears to be, and there are actually people who know what happened, but they just don't want to tell it. There are also some things about how the government tries to keep terrible things that happened in the past as secrets, and then about how we should confront the truth no matter how horrible it is. These two things are not necessarily new. We've seen and read these two things countless of times in movies and in novels, but I guess you can say that these two things are executed quite well in this novel. I also love how John Puller shows more emotions in this novel and also shows some vulnerability. These two things just make his character more relatable, in my opinion. And it's not that he didn't show any emotions in the previous novels. He did show some emotions, but he always appeared to be strong and tough, and it was kind of difficult for me to to feel relatable to him. Unfortunately, it's a different case in this novel, and I like it. I guess this thing is possible because this case is probably John Puller's most personal case ever. Lastly, Paul Rogers' revenge story is also good and entertaining, and it's also quite sci-fi-ish. You'll understand what I mean by sci-fi-ish if you read this novel. It's nothing new, but it is still fun to read nonetheless. And yeah, basically those are the things that I like from this novel, and as always, before we move on to the cons, don't forget to subscribe and turn that notification bell on. And also don't forget to share and like this video, especially if you enjoy it. Thank you. Okay, the first cons. Where the hell is John Puller's brother, aka Robert Puller? I mean, he's still in the novel, don't get me wrong, but what he does in this novel is pretty similar to what he did in the first and second novel, and that is he helped John Puller through a phone call. I think this is quite a big step back, because in the previous novel, he was involved directly in the case. And in addition to that, I was also happy to see him in action. Well, sure, the case in the previous novel was about him, the traitor who escaped from the most supposedly inescapable prison in America. But even then, it is mentioned in this novel that Robert Puller is his mother's favorite son. Apparently, when John and Robert were still young, John was a lot tougher and was more like his father, whereas Robert was not. But since Robert is the first son, people were going to compare him to his father, who at the time was already a legend in the army. So it was quite difficult for Robert to measure up to his father, and that's pretty much the reason why his mother cared a little bit more about him. So in my opinion, it's kind of strange for me to see him not involve himself in this case as much as John Puller does. But as much as I don't like this, I can't really hate it because I guess there are some, plausible reasons as to why he is not that involved. One of which is probably because he's a major in the United States Air Force. So, he has a huge responsibility and he can't just drop it all and do what he wants to do. And like I mentioned earlier, the case in this novel is proven to be much more complex than it initially seems. So I guess Robert doesn't want to be reckless about it. So yeah, although I don't like the fact that he's not in this novel that much, I can't really hate it because there are some plausible reasons. Next, what actually happened to John and Robert Puller's mother is not as climactic as I thought it would be. Don't get me wrong, it is still heartbreaking and all, but I was just expecting more. Third, although I had a good time reading this novel just didn't meet my expectations. And in my opinion, this novel is also a little less entertaining and a little less crazy than the previous novel, that is The Escape. Although this novel is definitely a lot less complicated than that one. I don't really know if this novel is the last one in the series, although it appears to be the case, but hopefully, David Baldacci will write one more novel so that the series can end with a bang. Okay, last but not least, I want to talk about the cover, which in my opinion is quite misleading. But I'm afraid that this might come out as a spoiler, so if you don't want to be spoiled, you can just skip this part and just watch the conclusion and the rating for this novel. And yeah, without further ado, here we go. So, as you can see on the cover, there is a woman walking towards a house, and then there is the title, and then there is this one sentence, "A killer too close to home." At first, it kind of gave me the impression that there was going to be a female killer. Or maybe John Puller's mother, Jackie Puller, would turn out to be a terrible person. But sadly, none of these things happen in the novel. There aren't even any female killers here. So I don't really know who is this supposed to be, but this cover is definitely misleading. Maybe this is the perfect example of, you can't judge a book by its cover. Because when I saw this cover for the first time, I had so many crazy expectations. One of which was, maybe John Puller's mother would turn out to be the killer. But apparently, that's not the case. So yeah, I was somewhat disappointed. So yeah, overall, although this book didn't meet my expectations, I still had a good time reading it. And therefore, I believe that this book deserves a 4.1 out of 5. And oh yeah, before I end this video, I would like to ask you guys a question, because apparently, although David Baldacci is definitely one of the most famous author in the crime, mystery, thriller genre, and you can easily find his books at Perry Plus, there doesn't seem to be that many people who read his novels. And I genuinely want to know why. So maybe if you have seen David Baldacci novels, at a bookstore or somewhere, but you have never bought it or have never read it, maybe you can share your opinions in the comments below and tell me why. Especially if you are a big fan of the crime, mystery, thriller genres. And yeah, that's all that I have for today's video. And as always, thank you for watching and staying, and don't forget to subscribe. And with that, my name is Dante from Dante's Book Talk. I'll see you in the next video. Bye bye.